Hello again.
Hi.
In the last segment, we talked about Daniel's compromise from a witness viewpoint in terms of his position in Babylon, both religiously, politically, and educationally. Mm-hmm. And in this one, we want to address the specifics of chapter 2, where we realize that, yes, indeed, Daniel was a witness to the true God, but not to the name. And this is the part you wouldn't have noticed if you're a Jehovah's Witness, that this chapter is fairly familiar to you if you're a witness because you use it. You use it, Daniel 2:44, I would say fairly continually in your ministry. Mm-hmm. That's one of our classic Armageddon texts. And we also are familiar with the background of it, I think, to some extent. This vision that Nebuchadnezzar has, this dream he has of this giant image with 4 metals and feet of clay. We're familiar with all of that picture. Yeah. But when we look at chapter 2 more closely, we realize there's a lot of things in there we don't notice.
So we've got our scenario of the different empires, and because the Watchtower talks a lot about that, and we're kind of geared up for that at the meetings, and when we do discuss Daniel 2, that's what we talk about.
So we wanted to read the less familiar passages of Daniel 2, skip over the dream itself and the description with which we think we're familiar, and we probably are to some extent, and deal specifically with what Daniel says about God, or how he designates God, to be very specific, in this passage. So we're going to read those portions that deal with Daniel's reaction to the situation as it developed in Babylon, because you remember Nebuchadnezzar had threatened to destroy all of the wise men of Babylon, including Daniel and his companions, because no one could interpret the dream for him. So this is where we pick up the story.
Right.
So look specifically for the designations here. Note specifically the designations that Daniel uses for God.
Okay. Daniel chapter 2. After that, Daniel went to his own house, and to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions he made known the matter, even for them to ask for mercies on the part of the God of heaven concerning this secret, in order that they might not destroy Daniel and his companions with the remainder of the wise men of Babylon. Then it was that Daniel, in a night vision, the secret was revealed. Consequently, Daniel himself blessed the God of heaven. Daniel was answering and saying, "Let the name of God become blessed from time indefinite even to time indefinite, for wisdom and mightiness, for they belong to him. And he is changing times and seasons, removing kings and setting up kings, giving wisdom to the wise ones and knowledge to those knowing discernment. He is revealing the deep things and the concealed things, knowing what is in the darkness, and with him the light does dwell. To you, O God of my forefathers, I am giving praise and commendation, because wisdom and mightiness you have given to me, and now you have made known to me what we requested of you, for you have made known to us the very matter of the king." Daniel was answering before the king and saying, "The secret that the king himself is asking, the wise men, the conjurers, the magic-practicing priests, and the astrologers themselves are unable to show to the king. However, there exists a God in the heavens, who is a revealer of secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what is to occur in the final part of the days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed, this is it. As you, O king, on your bed, your thoughts came up as regards to what is to occur after this, and the one who is the revealer of secrets has made known to you what is to occur. This is the dream and its interpretation. You shall say before the king, You, O king, the King of kings, you to whom the God of heaven, has given the kingdom, the might and the strength and the dignity, and into whose hands he has given, wherever the sons of mankind are dwelling, the beasts of the field and the winged creatures of the heavens, and whom he has made ruler over all of them. You yourself are the head of gold. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin. And the kingdom itself will not be passed on to any other people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, and it itself will stand to time indefinite. For as much as you beheld that out of the mountain a stone was cut, not by hands, and that it crushed the iron, the copper, the molded clay, the silver, and the gold, the grand God himself has made known to the king what is to occur after this. And the dream is reliable, and the interpretation of it is trustworthy. At that time, King Nebuchadnezzar himself fell down upon his face, and to Daniel he paid homage. And he said to offer even a present and incense to him. The king was answering Daniel and saying, Truly, the God of you men is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, because you were able to reveal this secret. Consequently, the king made Daniel someone great, and many big gifts he gave to him, and he made him the ruler over all the jurisdictional district of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel, for his part, made a request of the king, and he appointed over the administration of the jurisdictional district of Babylon Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Daniel was in the court of the king.
So we've read only the portions of this very long chapter which deal with Daniel's conversation, specifically his conversation about God, and the political appointments that come from this unique gift that Daniel has.
Right.
So there's a couple of problems for Jehovah's Witnesses already in here, but one is less likely to be noticed than the others. That is, how does he designate God? So I think you made a count, did you not, of the different designations in this specific context.
Yeah. He mentions, he gives about 8 designations and one where he talks about blessed is the name of God.
Which is a prayer.
But still doesn't use the name Jehovah.
Yeah.
So of the designations in here, I wrote them down. He calls God God of heaven, God of our forefathers, God in the heavens, revealer of secrets, grand God, God of you men. Well, that's actually the king says that. God of you men, God of gods, and Lord of kings. That's how the king speaks of God. None of them use Jehovah.
The Tetragrammaton. So you see a pattern when you actually look more closely at the text. Why is he making such strenuous efforts, it seems? Contortions almost. Some of these names seem to be extravagant, and all of them seem to be somehow substitutions for the obvious choice.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, in the Psalms, for instance, Yahweh or God constantly. But here, he's being very creative.
Yeah.
But we have to ask, why is he being so extravagant and creative when all he has to say is Yahweh, and he gets the message across to King Nebuchadnezzar and his entire court that Yahweh is the true God?
And I would say in my mind as a Jehovah's Witness, I thought he said Jehovah. So where did I get that impression that he said that name? It must have been in the literature that they say he's proclaiming God's name.
Yeah.
But when you read the text, it's not there.
And then when Nebuchadnezzar, at the end of the story, acknowledges the true God as not the only God, mind you, but the God of gods, as it were, the King of gods.
Yeah.
And adds a couple of designations himself to the list that Daniel has already given us.
And we're talking about the Old Testament. So, I mean, we're not talking about the New Testament and putting the name in. This is in the Old Testament,
Yeah.
and the name's not there.
So even in the very first reference that you read, blessed be the name, there's something hidden in that that shows that the transition to modern Judaism is already underway, even in the book of Daniel, because Hashem, the name, as we'll talk about in the next episode, is the official, as it were, substitute for the Tetragrammaton in Judaism.
Yeah.
And Daniel is already doing it. Even in a prayer where he's just with his Hebrew companions, apparently, or nobody, he's still observing what we now see today in the in the designations of God by Judaism itself. Even read in the synagogue, you see these substitutions going on, and we have to wonder why that's happening. And we can't content ourselves, if we see it in the Old Testament, with the idea that it's somehow modern Jewish superstition.
And yet, the character of God is certainly being witnessed to
Yeah.
in this passage.
Yeah. So in the next segment, we'll get into what the Watchtower does with this chapter.